Not every wound is visible. Some are carved deep inside the heart, by the very people who were supposed to protect us. For years, I believed my mother loved us equally. She always said, "A mother never chooses between her children." I trusted her words blindly, until the day I discovered the cruel truth. When it was time for me to go to college, I found out my mother had secretly taken my entire college fund, every dollar my late father had saved for me, and she gave it all to my younger sister, just because she was her favorite child. That day, my whole world collapsed, but I wasn't going to stay silent. This is my story. From the very beginning, my father was a man of discipline, hard work, and quiet sacrifice. He wasn't the type who expressed his love in big words or expensive gifts. Instead, he showed his love through late nights, long hours, and every penny he carefully saved for our future. I still remember being 10 years old, watching him come home exhausted from work, his hands rough and calloused from endless shifts. Yet no matter how tired he was, his eyes always softened when he looked at me. He used to say, "One day, you'll walk across that stage in a graduation gown, and I'll be the proudest father alive." Those words became the foundation of my dreams. My father wasn't wealthy, he didn't own businesses or big properties, but every week he placed money aside into a special savings account. Money meant only for one thing, my college education. He told me, "Education is the only inheritance I can leave you." That fund became my hope, my motivation, and my promise to him. When he passed away during my high school years, it felt as if the ground had been pulled from beneath me. My world collapsed. But the one thing that kept me strong was his dream for me. I believed my mother would protect his sacrifice. She reassured me, "Don't worry, your father's savings are safe. When the time comes, you'll have your college fund." I trusted her completely. Through my high school years, I worked tirelessly to honor that dream. I was an A student, winning scholarships, excelling in debates, and earning the admiration of my teachers. But no matter how hard I worked, I knew college would still be expensive. That fund was my lifeline. When acceptance letters finally arrived, I was overjoyed. The university of my dreams had not only accepted me, but also offered partial financial aid. I ran into my mother's room with the letter, tears in my eyes, expecting her to share in my joy. She jed me half-heartedly and said, "That's good, I suppose." I brushed it off, thinking maybe she was just tired. But when I asked about the college fund, her expression changed. Her smile disappeared, and a shadow passed over her face. She cleared her throat and said, "We'll talk about it later." A strange chill ran down my spine. Something didn't feel right. Days passed, and I noticed she kept avoiding the subject. Finally, one evening, I gathered the courage to press her. "Mom, the college deadline is near. I need the funds Dad saved for me. We have to pay the tuition deposit." Her eyes flickered with something I couldn't recognize. Guilt, maybe, or fear. She sighed and said the words that shattered me. "There is no fund anymore." At first, I thought I had misheard her. I laughed nervously. "What do you mean there's no fund? Dad saved for years. I saw him do it." But her silence told me everything. I felt my chest tighten, my throat burn, and my heart pound louder than ever. My father's sacrifice, his promise, and my entire future. Gone. And the worst part, I didn't yet know where that money had gone. But deep down, I already feared the answer. After hearing my mother say the words, "There is no fund anymore," I sat frozen. My ears were ringing as if I had been punched in the head. For years, I had clung to that fund like a lifeline. It wasn't just money, it was my father's legacy, his love, his sacrifice, and now she was saying it didn't exist? I demanded answers. My voice trembled, but my determination didn't. "Mom, stop playing games. Where is the money? Dad worked his whole life for that. Tell me the truth." She avoided my eyes. Her hands twisted the edge of her shawl nervously. After a long silence, she finally muttered, "I had no choice. Your sister needed it." Her words cut through me like a knife. "My sister? What do you mean she needed it? That money wasn't hers. Dad saved it for me." Mom raised her voice, trying to justify herself. "She's younger than you. She's delicate. She wanted to join a private academy, and I couldn't let her dream shatter. I used the fund for her future." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All my life, I had seen how my mother favored my sister. The extra gifts, the softer words, the blind defense whenever she got into trouble. but never in my darkest nightmares did I imagine she would sacrifice my future for her. My legs went weak. I dropped onto the chair, staring at her in disbelief. So, all of Dad's savings? Every single penny he worked for? You gave it to her? She nodded, without shame. You're smart. You'll find a way. But your sister? She wouldn't survive without my support. She deserves a chance too. I wanted to scream. My heart was pounding so loudly that it hurt. Deserves a chance? What about me? What about Dad's promise? Do I not deserve it? But my words meant nothing. To her, my pain was invisible. The following days felt like walking in a nightmare. I tried talking to my sister, hoping she would understand, maybe even feel guilty. But instead, she smirked. Well, maybe if you weren't so selfish, Mom wouldn't have had to choose. Besides, you'll be fine. You always figure things out. Her arrogance crushed me even further. Not only had she stolen my future, but she also believed she deserved it. I wanted to tell my relatives, to expose what Mom had done, but deep down, I knew they wouldn't take my side. My mother was loved by everyone, admired for being sacrificing and caring. Nobody would believe she had betrayed her own daughter like this. At night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my father's face flashing in my mind. His tired smile, his hopeful words, his dreams for me, all reduced to ashes. My chest burned with anger, betrayal, and helplessness. But one thought kept echoing in my mind. If I don't fight for myself, nobody will. I didn't yet know how I would do it. I didn't know where to begin. But I promised myself that I wouldn't let this betrayal define me. If my own family could betray me, then I would learn to stand without them. The morning after the fight, I sat at my study table, staring at my books. For years, I had imagined myself leaving for college with my father's savings as my safety net. Now, that dream lay shattered. But as I sat there, anger slowly turned into determination. If my mother could betray me, if my sister could mock me, then I had only one option left: to rely on myself. I opened my laptop and began searching. Scholarships, part-time jobs, online tutoring, anything. I applied to more than 20 different programs. Every rejection that landed in my inbox felt like another dagger in my chest, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. At night, when everyone was asleep, I whispered to my father's picture on the wall. I won't give up, Dad. You trusted me. You believed in me. I'll honor that, with or without their support. During the day, I started tutoring neighborhood kids. It didn't pay much, but it was something. Each coin I earned gave me strength. While my sister was out shopping with my mother, showing off the academy bag Mom had bought her with my fund, I was out sweating, fighting for every penny. There were times I broke down, nights where I cried into my pillow, wondering why I had to be the one left behind, why my mother couldn't love me the same way, but every tear hardened me, every disappointment forged a new layer of strength. One evening I overheard my mother bragging to a relative on the phone. She said, "My younger daughter will make us proud one day. She's the chosen one. I gave everything for her." Those words burned into my heart like fire. The chosen one. What did that make me? The discarded one? No, never again. From that night, my anger transformed. It was no longer about proving myself to my mother. It was about proving that I didn't need her approval, that her betrayal would become the reason for my rise. I began documenting everything. Tian, emails, the savings records, even Dad's old bank slips. Somewhere in my gut, I knew this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about justice. My father had entrusted her with my future, and she had stolen it. Whenever my mother or sister mocked me, I stayed silent, outwardly calm. But inside, I was a storm. I was building myself piece by piece, waiting for the day I could strike back. Weeks turned into months. I managed to secure a partial scholarship at a local college. It wasn't my dream university, but it was a start. The look of shock on my mother's face when I told her was priceless. She had expected me to crumble, to give up. Instead, I stood tall, holding my admission letter with trembling but proud hands. You actually managed this?" she stuttered. I looked her straight in the eyes. "Yes, without your help." For the first time, I saw fear flicker in her gaze. She realized something. Her control over me was slipping. And in that moment, I made another silent vow. This wasn't just the beginning of my education. It was the beginning of my revenge. The first day of college felt surreal. As I walked across the campus, the sound of laughter, conversations, and footsteps echoed in my ears. For a moment, I forgot everything. The betrayal, the pain, the humiliation. For a moment, I felt normal. But the illusion didn't last long. When I opened my wallet at the cafeteria, all I saw were a few crumpled notes. My classmates ordered meals and drinks without hesitation, while I quietly bought the cheapest item on the menu. I sat alone in the corner, sipping my tea, pretending I wasn't hungry. It was hard, balancing classes, tutoring kids in the evenings, and studying late at night. My body ached, my eyes burned, but my spirit refused to break. Each sleepless night was a reminder I wasn't just fighting for a degree. I was fighting to prove that I was stronger than their betrayal. In my literature class, I met a professor who became my silent supporter. He noticed my dedication, the way I stayed back after class to ask questions, the way I turned in every assignment on time. One day, he called me to his office. "You have potential," he said, sliding a book across the desk. "Don't waste it. Keep going." His words were like water to a dying plant. I clutched that book to my chest as if it were gold. At home, things were worse. My mother barely spoke to me, except when she wanted to remind me of how much she had done for my sister. My sister flaunted her academy life, posting pictures on social media with captions like, "Chasing my dreams thanks to Mom." I didn't reply. I didn't argue. But deep down, I was keeping count. Every insult, every smirk, every dismissal, all of it was fuel. One night, as I returned home late from tutoring, I overheard my mother whispering to my sister, "Don't worry about her. She'll never amount to anything. Focus on yourself. You're the one who will shine." My heart clenched, but I smiled. To myself, in the darkness of the hallway. Because she was wrong. She couldn't see it yet, but the day was coming when I would shine so brightly that her words would choke her. To keep myself motivated, I started writing in a journal. Every night, I poured my thoughts into its pages. The pain, the struggles, the small victories. I wrote about my father, how much I missed him, how much I wanted him to see me succeed. And every entry ended with the same line. One day, they will regret everything. Despite the hardships, I found moments of joy. A kind classmate shared her notes with me. Another invited me to join a study group. For the first time in months, I laughed. Genuinely laughed, and it felt like a wound slowly healing. But the shadow of betrayal was never far. When I returned home to my mother's cold stares and my sister's mocking words, the fire inside me roared again. College wasn't just giving me an education, it was giving me tools, knowledge, confidence, connections, and with every passing day, I was sharpening those tools, preparing for the day I would use them. That night, as I lay in bed, I whispered to my father's photograph again. "Dad, I won't let you down. They think they've broken me, but I'm only getting stronger." Weeks turned into months, and I had built a rhythm. Mornings at college, evenings spent tutoring children, and nights consumed by endless study sessions. My body was running on sheer willpower, but my heart was fueled by revenge. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. Our professor announced a scholarship competition. The winner would receive full financial support for the rest of their education, plus a chance to intern at a prestigious company. My heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just about money. This was a door, a chance to step out of the shadows and prove myself. As I held the application form in my trembling hands, I could already hear my mother's voice in my head, mocking me. "You? Compete with the best? Don't embarrass yourself." But I ignored that ghost of her voice. This time, I wasn't going to back down. For weeks I prepared. I spent every free moment in the library, poring over books, writing drafts, rehearsing presentations. My classmates saw me as the quiet girl who never wasted time, but they didn't know the storm inside me. At home, the tension grew worse. My mother and sister mocked my tired eyes and pale face. One evening when I returned late, my sister smirked and said, "What's the point of all this? You'll never win. You're just wasting your time." I didn't answer. I just smiled because her words no longer hurt me. They motivated me. The day of the competition finally arrived. I stood on stage, hands trembling, heart racing. As I looked at the audience, I imagined my father sitting there, nodding proudly. I took a deep breath and began. My voice shook at first, but as the words flowed, something shifted. I wasn't just giving a presentation. I was telling a story. My story. The story of resilience, of betrayal, of never giving up. My pain became my power, and I saw heads nodding, eyes widening, people leaning forward to listen. By the time I finished, there was silence in the hall, and then thunderous applause. Later that evening, when the results were announced, I held my breath. And the winner of this year's scholarship is my name. For a moment, I couldn't move. The world blurred as tears filled my eyes. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of victory. When I walked home that night, clutching the award letter, I felt taller than ever before. I was no longer the girl who was betrayed. I was the girl who had risen from betrayal. At home, my mother's face turned pale when she saw the letter. My sister's smile froze. You actually won?" my mother whispered, disbelief in her voice. I looked her straight in the eyes. "Yes, without your money, without your support, only with my father's blessing." For the first time, silence filled the room, and in that silence I tasted the sweetest flavor of revenge, the beginning of their regret. But deep inside, I knew this was just the start. Winning the scholarship wasn't the end of my story. It was the spark of something far bigger. Because true revenge takes time, and I was willing to wait. Winning the scholarship changed everything. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was rising. The financial support lifted the weight from my shoulders, and the internship offer opened a door I had only dreamed of. The company where I was placed was prestigious. Walking through its glass doors for the first time, I felt a surge of pride. This wasn't just a job. It was proof that I belonged in a world far bigger than the one my mother had confined me to. At work, I faced challenges. My supervisors were demanding, and the tasks were overwhelming. But compared to the battles I had already fought, nothing seemed impossible. I poured my heart into every assignment, staying late, double-checking every detail. Slowly, I earned their respect. Meanwhile, my college life also began to transform. I was no longer the quiet, lonely girl sitting in the corner. My classmates admired me for winning the scholarship. Some even approached me for help with their studies. For the first time in years, I felt seen. But at home, nothing changed. My mother's bitterness grew with each passing day. My sister couldn't accept that I was succeeding without their support. I often caught them whispering behind closed doors, their voices filled with anger and disbelief. One evening, as I returned home exhausted from work, my mother confronted me. "So now you think you're better than us? Just because you got lucky?" I looked at her calmly and replied, "This isn't luck. It's hard work, something you never believed I could do." Her face turned red with fury, but deep down, I saw it. Fear. The fear of losing control. At work, I met mentors who encouraged me to aim higher. One of them, a kind manager, once told me, "You have fire in your eyes. Don't let anyone put it out. One day you'll be a leader." His words echoed in my mind for days. A leader. Me. The same girl my mother had writ, and off as a failure. Every achievement felt like a dagger turned back toward the people who had betrayed me. I didn't need to raise my voice or seek revenge with anger. My success itself was the revenge. But still, I wasn't satisfied. Winning, studying, and working hard were only steps. True revenge, the kind that would leave a permanent mark, was yet to come. One night, as I sat by my window watching the city lights, I whispered to myself, "Dad, I'm making it. I wish you were here to see this. But don't worry, I'll make sure the world knows who your daughter is, and I'll make sure they regret what they did to me." That was the night I decided. My revenge wouldn't be a single act. It would be a journey. I would rise so high that my mother and sister would be forced to watch, helpless, as I built the life they had tried to steal from me. And step by step, brick by brick, I was getting there. Months of steady progress had changed me in ways I hadn't expected. I was stronger, quieter, sharper, like a person who had learned how to survive on embers and now knew how to build a fire from sparks. The internship gave me access to people, projects, and a network that I had only dreamed about. It also gave me leverage. One afternoon, my manager pulled me into his office with a folder in hand. "We're pitching a large educational initiative to a foundation next month," he said. "It's high profile. We need someone to co-lead the research and presentation. I want you on the team." My heart jumped. This was more than an assignment. It was an opportunity to make a mark, to show that I belonged at the highest table. I accepted, swallowing the tremor in my voice, and threw myself into the work. Days blurred into late-night strategy sessions, interviews with experts, data sprints, and rehearsals until my voice was hoarse. My colleagues watched in growing admiration. The project became my obsession. At the same time, the house grew colder. My mother's passive-aggressive comments tightened like a noose, and my sister's snide posts on social media felt like taunts thorned with privilege. But I'd learned to carry those stings silently. I was no longer proving anything to them. I was proving it to myself, and to the world. 2 weeks before the presentation, I ran into an old family acquaintance at the university library. He was a board member at a local philanthropic group that funded scholarships and education projects, the very kind we were pitching to. We exchanged pleasantries, and I didn't mention work. But his casual question, "What are you working on?" turned into a conversation about my project, my background, and my father's ideals about education. He listened intently, then said quietly, "Bring me your final pitch. If it aligns with our goals, I can introduce you to the board." My chest fluttered with possibility. If the project succeeded and this man's group supported it, it might not only be a career-making win, it could also open doors to scholarship funds, media exposure, and partnerships that would amplify my voice beyond this town. The night before the pitch, I barely slept. I rehearsed the presentation until every sentence felt like bone. I pictured my father's worn hands and whispered the promise I'd made to him. I would not waste this. Presentation day arrived, the conference room filled with stern faces, philanthropists, and industry leaders. When it was my turn to speak, I felt the familiar tremor, then the familiar calm. I told the story of access to education, of the invisible costs many families carry, and of how a well-structured program could transform communities. I wove in data, human stories, and a clear roadmap. I watched faces soften, heads nod, and pens move. After the QA, the lead board member, the acquaintance from the library, stood up and applauded. He then asked to meet with us privately. My manager's smile was wide. My colleagues clapped my back. Later that week, the foundation not only approved substantial funding, but also offered to highlight our initiative at a national education summit. The project went viral in our circle. My role was credited prominently, my inbox filled with connection requests and interview opportunities. When I walked into the kitchen that night with the good news, my mother and sister looked up from the television. My mother's face registered surprise, then a barely concealed attempt at pride. "That's nice," she said, voice clipped. My sister forced a smile. "Nice," I echoed, holding up the confirmation email. "We just secured funding that will support hundreds of students. This could expand to multiple cities." For a moment, I saw the flicker of regret in my mother's eyes, but she swallowed it and said, "You do this now if you like. We'll see where it goes." I did more than see where it went. Over the next few weeks, interviews and articles followed. People began to ask about my background in casual conversation, how I got here, what drove me. I told the truth when it mattered, about education, about sacrifice, and sometimes about the injustice that had pushed me forward. My story resonated with many. Messages started arriving from strangers who had faced similar betrayals, mothers who favored one child, sisters who were lifted on other people's hope. They thanked me for speaking up, for not folding. My project became a beacon for people who needed proof that pain could be channeled into purpose. At home, the atmosphere shifted. My mother's tone became less sharp in front of guests. Her attempts to minimize me were tinged with caution. My sister's arrogance dimmed under public attention. They could not ignore what the world now saw. My competence, my grit, my achievements, things that could not be erased with a few whispered lies. That shift was power. Not because I wanted to humiliate them, but because I finally had the means to rewrite the narrative. The turning point wasn't violence or exposure. It was visibility and validation. I had turned the leverage I built into fuel for change. The night I closed the project with an acceptance speech, tears in my eyes and applause ringing in my ears, I felt the line between past pain and future promise blur. My father's dream for me was no longer a memory, it had become a movement. And somewhere in the crowded auditorium, I knew my mother watched. She saw, perhaps for the first time, what she had taken from me. The knowledge of that realization would be part of what revenge meant now. Not to destroy, but to rise so fully that the ones who betrayed you are forced to witness your light. The weeks after the Foundation's approval were a whirlwind. My name began appearing in articles, small local newspapers, and eventually national blogs. At college, professors spoke of me as an example in lectures. At the company, my supervisors proudly introduced me as the young woman who turned an idea into action. It felt surreal. The same girl who once cried herself to sleep because her college fund was stolen was now being recognized for building something bigger than herself. Every interview, every handshake, every mention was a reminder that betrayal could be transformed into brilliance. But success came with its own weight. I was invited to the national summit where educators, politicians, and philanthropists gathered. My manager insisted I deliver part of the keynote. It was a chance to tell my story, not just to a room, but to a country. The night before, I stood before the mirror, rehearsing my speech. My eyes caught the reflection of my father's photograph on the desk. His gentle smile reminded me why I had started this journey. I whispered, "Tomorrow, Dad, they'll hear your dream through me." When I took the stage at the summit, my palms trembled, but my voice was steady. I spoke about resilience, about how access to education isn't just a privilege, but a right. I wove in parts of my own story carefully, not naming names, but sharing enough for the audience to understand the weight of betrayal and the triumph of perseverance. By the end, the hall erupted in applause. Some stood to their feet. Cameras flashed. And in that moment, I felt it. The victory wasn't just mine. It was my father's. It was every student's who had ever been told they weren't enough. Back home, the tension reached boiling point. My mother could no longer ignore my success. Relatives called her daily, praising me, asking for advice, wanting to meet me. My sister's envy spilled out in sharp words. "She thinks she's a star now. She's forgotten where she came from." I turned to her calmly. "No, I remember exactly where I came from. That's why I'll never be like you." The silence that followed was heavier than any insult. One evening, my mother tried to reclaim her role in my life. Over dinner, with forced sweetness, she said, "I always knew you'd achieve something. After all, it was my discipline that made you strong." I looked at her across the table, my fork frozen midair. For a moment, I almost laughed. Her discipline, the betrayal that nearly broke me? She wanted to rewrite history, to paint herself as the architect of my success. But instead of arguing, I leaned forward and said softly, "No, Mom, it wasn't your discipline. It was your betrayal. That's what made me strong." Her smile faltered. My sister stared, wide-eyed. For the first time, I saw my mother without her mask of control. Vulnerable. Small. That night, as I lay awake, I realized revenge had already begun to unfold. It wasn't about shouting or exposing her secrets. It was about living so fully, succeeding so loudly, that she had no choice but to choke on her own regret. The weight of recognition grew heavier in the weeks that followed. Journalists wanted deeper stories. A documentary team reached out to feature my project. I knew the moment was coming when the truth, the full truth, could be told. And when that day arrived, my mother and sister would be forced to watch, powerless, as the world celebrated the very person they tried to destroy. The day of the documentary screening arrived. A hall filled with students, educators, philanthropists, and journalists waited as the lights dimmed. My heart pounded as my story unfolded on the big screen. Not just the project, not just the scholarship, but the truth. The documentary spoke of betrayal without naming names. It told the story of a young woman whose college fund had been stolen, whose trust had been broken, but who refused to let that end her dreams. It showed footage of me working late nights, tutoring children, presenting at the summit, and leading change. As I watched, I felt tears sting my eyes. This wasn't just my revenge, it was my rebirth. When the lights came back on, the applause was thunderous. Cameras flashed. Reporters rushed to me with questions. One asked, "What gave you the strength to keep going when even your family didn't support you?" I took a deep breath and answered, "My father's belief in me, and the truth that betrayal doesn't have to end you. It can remake you." The words echoed through the room. That night, the documentary spread online, gathering millions of views. Messages poured in from around the world. People who had suffered similar betrayals wrote to me, saying they found hope in my story. At home, however, the atmosphere was unbearable. My mother avoided my eyes. My sister slammed doors and muttered insults under her breath. But their anger no longer hurt me. Their silence was proof that my revenge was working, not through violence, not through confrontation, but through undeniable success. One evening, my mother finally broke. She sat at the table, her hands trembling, her voice low. "I never thought you would make it this far. Maybe I was wrong about you." For years I had longed to hear those words, but now they felt empty, because regret spoken too late is nothing but ashes. I looked at her calmly. "You didn't just doubt me, Mom. You betrayed me, and that betrayal almost destroyed me, but I survived, and now I'm stronger than you can ever imagine." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't flinch. I had no more need for her approval. The climax of my revenge wasn't her regret, it was my freedom. The realization that I no longer lived in the shadow of her choices. I had built my own life, my own name, my own legacy. Months later, when the foundation expanded our project to multiple cities, I was invited to lead the program nationally. I packed my bags and moved away, leaving behind the house that had been both prison and battlefield. On my last night there, I walked into my room one final time. I placed my father's picture in my suitcase, kissed the frame, and whispered, "We did it, Dad. You and me." As I closed the door behind me, I felt the weight lift. I wasn't running away. I was stepping forward, into a future that was entirely mine. And that was the greatest revenge of all, not to destroy those who betrayed me, but to live so powerfully that they could never destroy me again.